Welcome to The Critique. Today, we are dissecting a comprehensive narrative account of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's historic 2026 address to the Knesset, contrasting the public display of an iron alliance with the internal friction of an opposition boycott.
Let's get right into the feedback.
The current draft effectively catalogs the historical anecdotes used by both leaders, but it fails to critically analyze why these specific historical emotional levers are being pulled right now to justify modern military strategy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the submission, it presents the soft historical ties and the hard geopolitical goals as two completely separate lists.
Right, they are just sitting there side by side.
Yes, so you have the Haifa cavalry charge or the Jewish community in Gujarat in one bucket.
And then the IMEC corridor and the defense deals in another.
Precisely. The weakness here is that missing causal link. The listener is just left with a list of, nice moments on one hand and a list of business deals on the other.
Without understanding how the former is actually being weaponized to sell the latter.
Right. You don't get the sense of how the sentiment is driving the strategy.
So my suggestion to the writer would be to bridge that gap between sentiment and strategy by framing the historical civilizational rhetoric as the necessary political cover for the controversial Iron Alliance and anti-terrorism cooperation.
I think that's the perfect way to handle it. You need to show the utility of the emotion.
Let's give them a concrete example. When discussing Modi's mention of the Beni Israel community or that best school in Gujarat,
right, the school run by the best family.
Yeah, explicitly connect that to his justification for the IMEC corridor. Show how Modi argues that this economic corridor isn't just a new business venture.
It's a resumption of ancient trade routes.
Exactly. Trade routes that are documented in the Talmud. That takes it from a charming piece of trivia to a civilizational mandate.
And you see the exact same thing with Netanyahu's speech. The draft quotes his story about the Indian nanny saving baby Moshe during the Mumbai attacks.
Which is incredibly emotional.
It is. It's a gut-wrenching story. But the draft just leaves it there as an emotional peak. Instead of just quoting it, the author needs to analyze how Netanyahu uses that specific emotional story to morally bind India to Israel's current war in Gaza.
He is essentially arguing that their grief is identical, and therefore their enemies are identical.
Right. It creates a permission structure for India. It says, we share this trauma, so we must share this military strategy. That is how you connect the anecdote to the geopolitical reality.
Moving on to the second major point, while the submission accurately reports the opposition's walkout, it misses a crucial opportunity to explore the dissonance between the domestic political fracture and the speech's central theme of shared democratic values.
This part really stood out to me. The text treats the boycott by the opposition, presumably led by Lapid, and the exclusion of Supreme Court Justice Amit as a sidebar.
Or just a bit of gossip at the very end.
Yeah. Exactly. The weakness is that it does not juxtapose this domestic instability against the leader's high-minded rhetoric.
They keep calling themselves fortresses of democracy.
Right. You have these two leaders standing there talking about being stable partners and fortresses of democracy, and the draft just glosses over the fact that half the room is empty.
So the suggestion here is to integrate the Channel 14 reporting on the boycott directly into the analysis of the speeches.
Bring it right into the main text to highlight the tension between the image they are projecting to the world and the reality on the ground.
A great concrete example of this would be to contrast Netanyahu's assertion about stable democracies directly with the visual description of the empty plenary seats.
The seats that were empty specifically because of the row over Justice Amit's invitation. You have to put those two images right next to each other.
And you can also analyze Speaker Amer Ohana's attempt to fill those empty seats with former MKs.
Channel 14 reported he was frantically trying to fill the void.
Right. Contrast that frantic curation of unity against Modi's praise for the August House. And then ask the hard question, does the instability mentioned in the C-14 commentary undermine the security guarantees required for the IMEC corridor?
Because that's what investors care about. If the parliament can't even sit in the same room for a historic state visit, how secure is this massive infrastructure investment? It turns a domestic squabble into a geopolitical liability.
Exactly. Which leads us to the third area of focus. The narrative accepts the IMEC corridor and the alliance against radical Islam at face value as a fait accompli, rather than scrutinizing the subtle diplomatic divergences hidden within the leader's
Yeah, the weakness in the current draft is that the listener has synthesized the speeches to show total agreement.
It paints them as perfectly aligned.
perfectly aligned, which completely misses the diplomatic friction point. It glosses over the nuance where Modi emphasizes the UN-endorsed Gaza Peace Initiative and a two-state implication.
While Netanyahu focuses heavily on breaking the axis of evil.
Right, so the suggestion for the writer is to deepen the analysis by identifying the conditions each leader places on this alliance, rather than just repeating their pledges of friendship.
We need to see the terms and conditions, not just the marketing pitch.
For a concrete example, highlight the contrast where Netanyahu speaks of breaking the jihadist access to secure the corridor, while Modi explicitly states that the path to peace and the corridor itself requires addressing the Palestine issue and regional stability first.
Modi is basically saying the trade route doesn't work if the region is on fire.
Exactly.
And then examine the zero tolerance for terrorism policy they both brought up.
Does Modi's definition fully align with Netanyahu's?
That's the question the draft needs to ask. Modi references the Mumbai 26/11 attacks, and his support for the Gaza Peace Initiative acts as a subtle check on Israel's military scope.
Whereas Netanyahu is talking about a seven-fronts war. They're using the same words, but laying out very different roadmaps for the day after the war.
Highlighting those differences makes the analysis so much more sophisticated. It shows they are strategic partners, but maybe not in total lockstep militarily.
That brings us to our final major critique. The pacing of the piece suffers from an over-reliance on the ceremonial fluff, distracting from the urgent economic and security news that constitutes the actual event.
Oh, the pacing is incredibly top-heavy right now.
Way too much real estate is dedicated to the warm hug on the red carpet.
And the brother rhetoric.
And that walking on water joke from 2017.
Right.
The weakness is that all of this delays the arrival at the core news.
The free trade agreement negotiations.
And the integration of AI and cyber defenses. That is the actual meat of the event.
So the suggestion is straightforward. Invert the structure to lead with the hard news, the billions in defense deals and the FTA, and use the ceremonial aspects only as color commentary to support those hard facts.
Put the context before the content. For example, start the analysis with that C14 report stating that government ministries have already approved decisions worth tens of millions.
And that they are establishing a permanent trade representation in India. Yes, start with that massive bureaucratic shift. Then use the hug to show the personal chemistry that is actively facilitating these deals. The hug isn't the story. The deals are the story.
Another concrete example would be to focus on the specific cooperation mentioned, the cyber, AI, desalination, and agriculture.
The 100 Centers of Excellence.
Right. Present that 100 Centers of Excellence goal as the headline, rather than a footnote buried under the speeches.
Because those centers are about food security for over 1 billion people in India via Israeli ag tech. That existential need anchors the entire alliance.
It explains why India is at the table in the first place.
Exactly. If you restructure the piece to lead with the money and the tech, the historical anecdotes and the hugs suddenly make a lot more sense as the political grease keeping the wheels turning.
So, to summarize our feedback today, this critique focused on transforming a descriptive report into a sharp political analysis.
By bridging the gap between historical emotion and military strategy.
Juxtaposing the shared democratic rhetoric directly against the visual reality of the opposition boycott.
Scrutinizing the subtle diplomatic differences regarding Gaza and the conditions of the alliance.
And finally, fixing the pacing by prioritizing the hard economic and security news over the ceremonial pleasantry.
If the writer can implement these changes, it will offer a much more profound understanding of this historic visit.
The listener is highly encouraged to revise the narrative to include these tensions and resubmit for a final polish. We would love to see where this piece goes.
Absolutely. It has great potential once those connections are made.
Thanks for tuning in to The Critique.